Hi, everyone. Welcome to Writing in the Law, where we find out how writing is used in the world of work. Welcome, everybody. I'm super happy to see you. Happy Indigenous Peoples Month. We're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement read by student Sarah Capule.
We at San Diego Mesa College acknowledge that the land we occupy is unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people, indigenous to this region from time immemorial. The Kumeyaay people continue to demonstrate strength in their ability to surmount generational trauma, which started with the injustices of colonization and continues to this day. The relationship of the Kumeyaay people with the land underlies their strong commitment to protect the land, preserve their heritage, and work for balance and harmony. This land acknowledgement is our commitment to honor the Kumeyaay people and to establish a relationship with them based on truth and mutual respect.
Thank you. And thanks to all the people who helped me put this together, including Erica Olmos from Career Services, who's working in the back, the Work-Based Learning Program, the English Department, Pathway to Law, student assistants, Lonnie Alfrey and Sarah Capule. If any of you is interested in the Pathway to Law program, meeting students who maybe have the same goals you do, I think some people from Pathway to Law are here, right? Pathway to Law folks? Like two? Okay, excellent. You can find them by Googling SD Mesa Pathway to Law and learn more about the program and how to become involved. So I'm an English teacher. I'm chair of the English department. I got involved in work-based learning and I started thinking about how does work-based learning fit into classes like English? I mean, in some ways, it's the ultimate work-based learning class, right? Because everyone writes in their career in some way. So we all want to be good communicators, good writers. But what do people really do? We never sort of talk to students about how that writing is used, just that it is used. So I joined Pathway to Law as part of the advisory committee and started thinking about how lawyers write. Or, you know, I just started looking it up, right? I Googled it like anyone else, right? How do lawyers write? And I ended up finding, of course, a subreddit on this. If you're interested in that, it's called, the subreddit is called Law School. So if you look that up, Reddit, Law School, you'll see some of these conversations. People looking for law school, people struggling in law school, asking questions, what do you do when, that sort of thing. And someone asked the question, was it helpful to be an English major? Because that's one of the big majors when you're going to law school: philosophy, English, history, poli-sci. Those are the ones that tend to help you. I had an English major student once at SDSU go off to law school, and she told me that nobody there can write. Is it true? So I think it's important. So I'm going to introduce you to our attorney panel today. I'll start with Erin, who is on your right. Erin Benler-Ward's practice focuses on general liability, personal injury, and professional liability litigation. She began her studies, like you, at a community college, and that is her superpower. Here on your left, we have Arcelia Magaña. She represents employers from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies in employment law issues. She also serves as Pro Bono General Counsel for MANA de San Diego, an organization that supports the empowerment of Latinas. She was born to Mexican immigrant parents, another superpower. Barney, in the middle, Barney Connaughton is a family lawyer focused on divorce mediation. He serves as a family law settlement judge for the South Bay branch of the San Diego Superior Court. He graduated from UC Davis with double majors in political science and English. Superpower. So I'm really happy to have them all here today. I asked them to tell us their college to career stories. What made them decide on law? Where did they change their mind and do other things if they did? How did they decide on majors? How did all that work for them? So would one of you in particular like to start?
Okay, I guess I'll start.
All right,
So
thank you.
I will begin my words by saying that I am on a detour into the law and I consider myself to be a writer. So one day, and it's been a long detour, I've been in the law for about 30 years, but I still think of myself as a writer. And one day I am going to finish up my career doing what I'm doing and I'm going to write. So that's kind of the beginning for me. When my first experience with the law, I was in 10th grade and I was in a history class and we were studying King Henry VIII. And the teacher assigned us roles for the trial of King Henry VIII. And I was the defense counsel for King Henry VIII. I showed up with my jacket on and my briefcase, and I got King Henry VIII acquitted in 10th grade. So that was my beginning of my interest in the law. And I still thought of myself as being a writer. And so when I applied to college, when I applied to UC Davis, I was thinking I want to be an English major, which gives me the opportunity to write, but also it's a pre-law category. So if you're going to go to law school, it's one of those suggested majors to have in preparation for law school. So I kept my options open, being a lawyer or being some kind of a journalist or something, or a writer. And when I went to UC Davis, I actually landed a job on the school newspaper. And I wrote my first fabulous article for the paper and I turned it in and I got it back from the editor and they had taken my voice out of it. They had taken all the wonderful fluff that I put into it out of it. And it was just this bare bones explanation of the information that I was giving. And for me, that like changed my mind on journalism. I go, the reason I like to write is I like creativity. I like the expression of my voice. And so I kind of from there on out, I was pre-law, I was studying. And so then I started taking political science courses because again, it's another background area for going into law school. And I think kind of the common theme with both of those majors is you do a ton of reading and you do a ton of writing. And you're constantly up against deadlines because the next paper's due, you got to read the next book, and then you got to do the next paper. And so all of that, I think, is fabulous preparation for law school because that's what you do in law school. You do a ton of writing and you do a ton of reading. And so I think English is a fabulous major for going into law school. I have no regrets about having that as one of my majors. And I took those tools. I took critical thinking, being judicious with words. So, finding ways to reduce my words and be efficient with my words and try to shorten things. All those things are great. Those are great tools for taking into law school because you're going to be doing a ton of that. And it's also really great tools to take into the practice of law. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's kind of my story coming in. I wanted to keep my options open, and then I just found that the English options that were available, becoming a writer right at a young age is also, it's a difficult way to pay the bills and raise the family and that sort of thing. And the type of writing like journalism didn't interest me. So.
Awesome. Y'all, I had no idea what I wanted to do for the longest time. I did not fall into the, I had no plan. I graduated from high school. I had expectations to go to college. So I went up to Palomar, did 22 units my first semester. I don't recommend doing that. And I got through Palomar and I got my, I think it was, is it still called TAG, the transfer to UCs? And I applied to UCs. I got into Santa Barbara. It was far enough away that my parents weren't going to drop in, but close enough I could go get food if I was hungry. That's where I went. I went to Santa Barbara and I enjoy reading. I enjoy writing. And so I had a lot of opinions. So I was a poli-sci major with a general goal, I think, of like trying to get into the State Department. That was my aspirational goal. And then maybe like do government or something after that. I had no plans. I never expected anyone to see my transcript in college. Let me tell you that. And when I got out of college, it was fine, but it reflected that in some occasions. And I didn't know what I wanted to do because the Foreign Service Test is this test you take once a year. It's run by the State Department. It's hard as all get out, and you get on a list. If you pass it, And depending on where you're ranked on the list, as they need people, they like pull people off. And you gotta take it every year. So that is not a great way to plan for like anything. And I did not know what I wanted to do. So I ended up doing the first job I could, which was at a DUI defense firm, just shuffling paper. It was not my jam, but I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting because you basically got to read police reports all the time. It was kind of fun. And so I got out of there, I went to another firm, and I spent basically a couple years trying to decide if I wanted to go to law school because I knew it was a lot of money. And I ended up getting my paralegal certificate. I worked for a couple years with one certain firm. I tested the waters. I was like, this is acceptable. It wasn't great, but I knew what I was doing when I was going into the process. I ended up going to Cal Western because for me, I wanted a place that I was guaranteed to pass the bar. That place was one of the ones that did that. And I also happened to know from my couple of years knocking around some lawyers that went there. So it's always good to have that network started. And I did that. And I got out of there, and then it's all been downhill from there, and that's led me here.
All right, downhill. We love that.
All right.
Arcelia.
Good morning. Is it still morning? Still almost? Yes, it is. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Arcelia. I'm from Escondido, so also North County. I wanted to be an attorney since I was about 5 years old. And that actually sparked because my dad, who is a gardener, and he's been a gardener for almost the last 50 years, his boss's son was an attorney. And I used to beg my dad to let me go to work with him, and he'd teach me how to like ride the tractor, and I'd get to feed and ride the horses and all that fun stuff, help him water like the green plants and the orchids, and that's why my favorite flower is an orchid. And one day his boss's son came out dressed in a really nice suit. And me being 5 or 6 years old, I turned to my dad and I was like, that guy's dressed so fancy. What does he do? And my dad said, he's a lawyer. And so, you know, I went home, I told my parents that I also wanted to be a lawyer. And my mom said, well, if that's what you want, you can do it. And it was from that moment on that even though I didn't know what a lawyer was, I knew that I could do it because my mom told me so. And all I had to do was study hard and have that goal. And so all throughout my life as a little kid into high school, I did Escondido Youth Court, which is a youth diversionary program that Escondido had for a period of time, then didn't have, and then had, luckily, when I was in high school. And so I got to defend and prosecute my classmates who were truant and, you know, they were out playing hooky and whatever. A lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to get just a file and to see all of these facts and to figure out what angle I was going to take these facts and run with. How I was going to advocate for them to get not as harsh of a deal, right? Or advocate for them to have to do 1 million hours of community service. And so that was a lot of fun for me. It helped me use like my advocacy skills, my writing skills, my skills of persuasion. And then I got into UC Berkeley, and when I was there, I joined clubs like the Latino Pre-Law Society. I also did Justice Corps, which put me in the courthouse helping folks in their self-help center. So hearing a lot of domestic violence victims, folks that wanted a child custody order, hearing people's stories and then figuring out how to take their stories and put them in a way that got them the legal result that they wanted. Because when folks come to you and they tell you these very emotionally charged stories, you want to take that story and then also emotionally charge in an emotionally charged way, convey it to the court. And sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes the best way in order to reach that legal result is to take what they've told you, figure out how to keep the essence of that pain and of that desire and frame it in a way that gets the legal result, right? And that might not always be, I'm very sad, please, let me keep my kid. That isn't always gonna do it. And so, yeah, I mean, it was on-campus clubs, it was joining these organizations. Justice Corps was a huge part of my career. I think that's still something that's available in most undergraduate institutions. Also for People of Color, Inc., which, as the first in my family to be an attorney, first in my family to go to law school, I didn't know any attorneys growing up. These types of organizations really helped demystify that process for me. Yeah, and now I practice employment defense, and it's a fun time, which we can talk about later.
Okay, excellent. So far, does anybody have any questions about their stories of college to career? You can always get back to this, but I just wanted to check in, see if you were thinking about something.
I actually missed something. So, at Berkeley, I majored in legal studies and classical civilizations. And I actually started out as a poli-sci major, but then I took a poli-sci class on American history, and I really hated my professor and how it was being taught. And I took a couple of weeks of that class, and I was like, no, this is not for me. I got out of that class. I was still in time to jump into a legal studies course, and I loved it. It was a course on why people are penalized the way that they are and the different types of penal systems around the world. It was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, legal studies was a really great major. Poli-sci, my husband majored in poli-sci at Cal, and he loved it, but it was not for me.
Thanks for that. So are you saying that you fell into legal studies, or you were already a legal studies major?
I fell into it, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yes.
To decide to go to law school, I think you had mentioned that you were kind of going back and forth about it. For each of you, what was the deciding moment where you decided this is worth it to go to law school versus just having your degree?
Well, for me, when I was working in law firms as a paralegal, I could see what they were doing, and I wanted to have more decisions about what I did at work, and I wasn't going to be able to do that if I didn't have my bar card.
The agency factor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, the opinions.
For me, it was basically in my sophomore year in college. I considered myself pre-law. I was planning on going to law school, so that's where my focus was from that point on.
I always knew that I was going to go to law school. It was just the goal that I had set out for myself. But once I was there, it was very difficult to continue to convince myself that that was the place that I belonged. Because law school is really hard. And there are days where you feel like you are messing up and you just want to quit and drop out. And you have to find something, some push or, some desire that keeps you there. And for me, it was my family, right? Like being the first in my family to be an attorney, and being able to pave that way for my nieces and nephews. That was what kept me in law school, and honestly, what keeps me being an attorney, because being an attorney is not that fun, sometimes, right? Other times it's a lot of fun, but yeah.
For me, is I paid the semester's tuition already.
I paid for this, I can't drop out. Yeah. I'm particularly interested in the comment about falling into legal studies, because I was back and forth with a student just yesterday. She was taking 7 classes, first of all, and she wanted to stay in them all, but she couldn't attend a couple of them because of some upheaval in her life. And she had wanted to just do them kind of like correspondence courses, right? But this was like a lecture class where you have to be there. And I said, well, you always, we'll see if we can work this out or find you another class, but you could always withdraw. And she said, no, because I'm gonna transfer and they'll see they'll see that W and they'll think less of me and I might not get into a university. And I see that among a lot of students, like I can't drop, I can't withdraw. But I want to remind you, it happens a lot. I mean, probably the three of you have all dropped or withdrawn from classes at some point, because sometimes it just has to happen. You hate the instructor. I mean, that could well be it, right? That person, I mean, you just can't do any more with them. You'll go insane trying to just stay in there and get the work done for the semester when you can leave and pick up another class. So I just want to remind people that in life, do-overs are always possible and changing direction is always possible. People that are deep into their careers will always tell you that that is true, that they didn't sort of sign on to one thing and then just pew, make a straight line there. Also, Arcelia, was it helpful to join clubs? You said you found clubs like the Justice Corps, I can't read my writing, the Justice Corps and People of Color Inc.
Yeah, so Justice Corps is an organization that you have to apply to be part of. They give you a stipend, which helps out. I mean, it's not a lot, but it helps with transportation and food and stuff like that. But the Latino Pre-Law Society really helped me out, particularly because they brought attorneys to our group meetings. And there were a lot of people in that club that were just like me that did not have lawyers in their family. And so being able to be in a room with other attorneys who could at least tell you that, you know, once you graduate from undergrad, you go to law school and you have to take the bar exam. And there's this like whole procedural aspect to becoming a lawyer that isn't totally intuitive. And like, yes, we've got Google and, you know, we're able to research it, but it's different from when someone is actually telling you like, these are the steps you need to take. So yeah, joining those clubs, instrumental.
How many people belong to clubs? Organizations on campus? What about stuff like Umoja, EOPS, Next Up, stuff like that? Those are really great organizations. I think they always help with things like that, right? Special meetings where they say, hey, here's what's next. Here's how we do this. Well, let's move on. Does anyone else have questions before we move on? No. Okay. Yes,
I
Sarah.
think Arcelia already answered a part of this, but when faced with many deadlines, assignments, and non-academic trials, how did you persevere to accomplish long-term goals?
Stubbornness.
I was a procrastinator in college and but I never let myself go up to a class without the assignment. So a lot of times it was a late night session the night before and I maintained that. And so that was my standard that I made myself live up to. So I never missed a deadline through my practice of law. I've never missed a deadline because it's important.
Yeah, I mean, tying it back to like finding your purpose and like your why, right? Like making sure that you're grounded in that way. I am also a procrastinator. I think I do my best work when I'm like under the gun, fair amount of pressure, but if I wait too long, obviously then I'll get in trouble. I would also add that finding something that I really enjoyed to help keep my mind off of other things has really helped me. I just signed up for a hula class. So I used to hula dance when I was in high school, and it was something that separate and apart from the school and like family pressures, right? Because when you're first generation, you've got a lot of pressures to succeed. Separate and apart from all of that, it was doing something that I really enjoyed for myself that helped keep things balanced. It helped keep me motivated to do that assignment, right? Because I get this done and then I can go party with my friends, or I get this done and then I can go salsa dancing. Yeah, just finding that right balance.
Yes.
Hi, so this is the topic that we kind of talked about in our English course, is the use of AI in education system. I know it's not a perfect system, but it's ever developing. Do you find yourself running into more uses of AI within your work field? And do you feel like it will break a barrier of difficulty when it comes to like law school or just law in general?
Okay, so, I used ChatGPT to start a cover letter for the last job I applied for, because I hate writing cover letters, they're awful. And I was standing there, sitting there in front of the white screen, and I was like, I hate cover letters, that's all I had written on there. So at least I gave it some prompts and it generated something, and it was absolute nonsense. And it was unusable, but it was enough to get the ball rolling for me. So in that context, yes. In the actual law, in the actual practice of law, heck no. Maybe eventually one day. It is definitely not there yet. And I know we all are aware of multiple lawyers who have used that stuff, filed motions, filed legal paperwork of some sort with made up cases and got hauled in front of a judge and played alive.
I saw a piece of that, that was fun.
Yeah, and not just one, it's a fair number, and I know we are all paranoid about that, and I do not want to be part of that. And I also just don't think that it's there yet. It may be someday, but it's definitely not something I use for like actual work.
I 100% agree. I will use ChatGPT or Microsoft Pilot or whatever the AI program is, to like help get me started on something that I will not be submitting to the court, right? So if, for example, writing a blog post for my firm, right? Like writing a snapshot on a law that just came out that's, going to be going into effect soon. I might use ChatGPT to synthesize, give me some sort of summary of what this is, or like help get me started. But honestly, I have found that ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, they will give you wrong information, right? And so it will synthesize whatever is out there, true or not true, and give you this thing. And you then end up spending, or I've spent more time going through it, figuring out what is legit and what is not than I would have done if I would have just written it myself. So I will use it to like help me write an email, help get me started with an email that I'm like dreading to write, right? And it'll give me like a little shell and I'll be like, all right, this is good, this does not sound like me. And that's all I will use it for, because those horror stories are absolutely real and they scare me.
I think that, I think it's definitely coming. I mean, clearly it's coming, and it's probably gonna play a bigger and bigger role in the law as we move forward. I'm like an old dog that I mean, I'm resistant to it because, something about my writing is my voice in my writing that doing, using AI it's not gonna, I mean, I guess it can imitate my voice, but it's not my voice. And I just actually got finished writing a book that I'm publishing, and the question in uploading it into Amazon to publish it was, did you use AI? I generate this, this writing. And I was able to check, no, I didn't use it. I didn't use it at all. When I got completed, I thought about using it for editing, throwing it in there and see what edit it did and comparing how it did it to how I did it. And I just decided, no, I just want this to be entirely my voice. As a creative writer, that's what I don't like about AI is, are we going to be able to recognize if the blog that I've written is all for me, or if it's been generated from AI or something. So I'm resistant, but it's the writing's on the wall, it's coming.
And also some courts even make you sign a promise that you're not using AI. And also the law, 10 years behind society, maybe 15 in any given aspect. So even if it becomes very prevalent in X, imagine law firm's gonna be way back in. Takes a long.
Thank you. Did you hear what Erin said? Played alive. All right, any other questions? Well, we're starting to talk about writing, so let's talk about that. I'm gonna go with you first this time, Barney, because you said you've just written a book.
Yeah, so in my career, so the first portion of my career, I litigated. I was a litigator in divorce. I would represent one spouse in the divorce process. That legal process with the court begins with a preparation of a pleading where you say all the fabulous things about your client, all the miserable things about the other side, to advocate to accomplish what's best for your client. And so that's the process we use. My English writing, my English skills in doing that, I was able to write very concise pleadings that focused on the important stuff, took some of the emotional stuff out of it and teed it up for a judge. And then the way that I practiced is I also kind of gave solutions to the problems that were coming, which was, I would say, a kind of a unique approach. A lot of attorneys would just throw it all out there and leave it to the judge to kind of sort it all out. But taking that approach of organizing very concisely, saying where my client was coming from, and then what would be the solution that would be good for the family. Of course, advocating for my client, but also putting it in the context of what's good for the family. And I found that kind of taking the high road and taking some of those attacks out and putting important information in there so the judge had that to consider, but also not just tearing apart the other side, was a way to get the judge's ear. And in family law, the judge, before he comes out and takes the bench, reads these pleadings, and they kind of have their preconceived notion of what they're going to do. So if you write it up well, then you have a much better chance of the judge coming out and kind of being somewhat aligned with you. You still have to make your arguments in open court and get to, convince the judge from there. And if you have a good writer on the other side, you're up against the other side, but it's kind of deciding what you're going to put in the stuff, what you're going to highlight. And in family law, it's just so contentious in family law that your clients want you to tear the other side apart. And so it's a matter of calming them and saying, okay, well, I think I know what a better approach to take here. And so that was the first part when I was litigating. And then I took a mediation training about 17 years ago. And in taking that training, it's divorcing out of court. It's basically taking the two spouses, sitting down with both of them and educating them so they understand what their rights are, walking them through their options, making sure they both have all the information that they need so that they can make good decisions, and then helping them communicate with each other to get to a resolution and then writing it all up. So I found that and I go, this is the way that divorce should be. Every once in a while, you're going to have couples that can't sit down at the same table and do that. But for a majority of couples, they're upset with each other, they're angry, maybe they don't like each other, but that doesn't mean that they need to go into the courts and duke it all out in court and spend a couple of years mired in doing it. So I shifted my practice. So now I'm just doing mediation, and the writing that I do now is settlement agreement. So it's basically writing up the terms of what the couple has agreed to. And in doing that, there's legalese in there. But you're writing this document for this couple. So you got to try to figure out a way to pare down the legalese so that it's understandable for the couple. It's detailed so that they don't run into, problems and pitfalls as they go along. Everything's been covered. But in doing that over time, I've written pretty much every provision that I could possibly need for an agreement. And so when I work with a new couple, they've agreed to doing this with the house, and I've already written that. So I'm going to pull that out, put it in there, not reinvent the wheel. So you lose creativity. You're just redoing and redoing and redoing and redoing. And for me, that's great. I support my family by doing that work, but it doesn't kind of meet that creativity in me. And so in addition to that, kind of what's kept me enjoying the law is I write a weekly blog, and I sit down, every Friday I got to get that blog out, and it's me tackling a legal issue or me sharing something personal about myself so that my clients can see kind of what I'm about and what my philosophy is. And so I do that, and that gives me some sanity in my work. And then the other thing that I do is I get up 5 o'clock every morning, and I take an hour of time to just sit with my thoughts. I am not allowed to do anything that has to do with work, so I'm not writing my blog, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm just checking in with myself to see where I'm at, how I'm feeling, am I bringing stress into my morning, and then I write about it. And every morning religiously, I take that hour. It's my time. It's just me, and I write. And I would say that's. I mean, earlier there was mention of how do we keep the stress out of our jobs, and how do we meet our deadlines and do all of that stuff. And for me, it's that joyful little bit of writing that I get to do that's just me. And it's part of it is I'm working on my next career. My next career is going to be doing this creative writing. And so it's giving me a little outlet to be doing that. So legal writing can be boring, especially where I'm at. I'm not even writing the pleadings to try to, say my side of the case to a judge anymore. I'm just writing up the terms that the couple has agreed to. That, again, why would I do it all over again, since I did it well a prior time? I'll just introduce that in. So for me, I'm doing that. And then kind of the blogging has, I've taken all that content and I've put it together in a book. And a book that basically, I don't know if you saw the movie Jerry Maguire, but at the beginning of that movie, he like pours out his soul in this mission statement. And for me, that's what I feel like this book is. I've poured out my soul about why do we divorce the way we divorce? There's this better way that, yes, maybe us attorneys won't make as much money doing it because each couple is paying a lot less, but it's the right way. I mean, it's the right way to sit it. If you're gonna dissolve a marriage, why not work with the person that you're leaving to figure out something that makes sense to everybody, that lets everybody move on with life. So I've had an opportunity to take my writing skills and put that together, and we'll see how it does. I haven't gotten the go ahead from Amazon yet that it's ready to go out there, but I'm hoping it'll give a good message to the world.
Why did you initially choose family law, specifically like divorces?
Very quickly, I got out of law school at a terrible time. I knew I was like you, I had no attorneys in my family or that I was connected to. And I wanted to stay in San Diego. And there were attorneys that had been at working for 4 or 5 years that were being let go by firms because it was a bad time for law. And so I set up a shop with 2 of my buddies from law school in PV. I spent a lot of time surfing and not practicing law, but there was a program that we would get clients that would pay $65 an hour, and we were given a mentor who was a top-notch family law attorney in the community. So anytime, oh my gosh, this issue has come up, I can just get the attorney on the phone and he'll talk me off the ledge. And so I did that. And then I started, I did some volunteer work for the volunteer lawyer program that was more family law cases, and I became proficient at it. I didn't take a single family law class in law school. I went to they were serving El Pollo Loco at a get together of the Family Law Association or something. I went and snuck in and got some chicken, but that was the extent of my law school exposure to family law. So I kind of fell into it. It was what I was able to get through the referrals.
So as you went along this pathway, it was like you met up with one person or one opportunity and took that, and then that kind of led to another and then another.
Yeah.
It wasn't like family law and went right there.
Yeah. And 4 years ago is when I made this shift to mediation, and I've never been happier in my career. It's where I like to argue in court. I mean, that's fun, but it's not the right thing. I mean, it's like a failure of the attorneys in family law for having to fight in front of the judge. So I found the way of doing it that, best helps the clients that I work with.
Like, was it difficult, like working with clients with kids?
Now mediating or before?
Before.
It's because you're stuck in a system that it takes 1 year to 2 years to divorce, and the family is feeling that, including the kids. And so, yeah, absolutely.
I see that's a great chart. You as a lawyer, you kind of have to parse those motions out. But I guess my question, I'll try and short it, sometimes like in Western philosophy or laws, like based off of the history and stuff, it's like there's a very logic-based approach. And I remember in my philosophy class learning about this philosopher called Hannah Arendt, which said sometimes emotions have a place in philosophy. So I'm wondering, do emotions have a place in law, or is there room for emotions in law, or is it all, it has to be logical, it has to, or how do you do that?
I can quickly start and say that family law, it's all about it starts with it's just so emotionally charged, and you have to, the client has to get through the emotions to be able to, think logically to resolve the issues. Us attorneys, we know, we see the solution, but we're not mired in the emotion, so it's managing the emotions, and mediation gives me an easier way to manage both sides of the emotions. Taking one side, it's challenging because you don't know what's happening behind the other closed door and that sort of thing.
I bet you have dealt with some emotionally charged clients.
100%. So, so I do employment defense now. I used to do plaintiff side employment. So I've been on both sides of the employment law context. And while I'm not dealing with people's children or people's divorces or people's freedom, I am dealing with their livelihood, right? Like people who have been discriminated against or retaliated against, or they believe that they've been wrongfully terminated. And those or employers who believe that they're being sued unjustly, right? And, this employee would always take breaks in the middle of the day for X amount of hours, and now they're claiming wage an hour. What is going on, right? And so a lot of what I have to do is kind of boil things down into two kind of main takeaways, right? All of my writing focuses on who is my audience and what is my purpose. And so whether it's the answer to the complaint, or when I was doing plaintiff side work, the actual pleading, or it's a mediation brief, or it's a status update to the client, I always have to figure out, what is my purpose in writing this? Is it just to inform and convey no bravado, right? Like there is a little bit of posturing that you have to do in a lot of the writing that you do in the law. So, for example, in a mediation brief that I just drafted, yes, my audience is the mediator, the neutral, who's going to be reviewing my brief and seeing my argument, but my audience is also my client, right? And my audience might also be the insurance adjuster who's throwing in money to help resolve this matter. And so I have to take all three of those different audience members and figure out how to craft my mediation brief so that it tailors to all three. And so it has to be persuasive enough to get my facts and the law, persuasive and informative enough to get the facts and the law out to the mediator, but also I have to advocate and I have to posture a little bit so that the client knows that I am fighting for their interests, right? Even if I think that, including a sentence in there about how opposing counsel and I have had all of these conversations and all of these fights or whatever, it may not serve the mediation brief. It might serve my client to know that I'm letting the mediator know that opposing counsel has been a little difficult. So it is about, one, having fun with your writing. So kind of to your point of, is there that wiggle room of emotion and logic? There is that wiggle room, but it has to be within reason, right? It has to be within the bounds of fulfilling the purpose that your writing is set out to accomplish. I hope that answers your question and also your question. Okay.
Good job.
Oh, I get to answer this too. Yeah, I think what Arcelia said was mostly right. The emotion, I am not, I'm not a person well suited to the kinds of profession they do. I am not a person that can sit with another individual who's in their worst day and time and freaking the heck out and be there for them and be their rock and then take all of that and sift through. That is not my jam. And so for me, I'm not a big fan of emotions in my job, like, they exist, I'm aware they exist, but I don't deal with them much. But that being said, everybody has emotions mostly. And so it comes into their writing, whether that's through the client or yourself. And the part of writing that I think is the most fun in law is what she was saying, where you have to try and within the bounds of this little sandbox that you have, be as creative as you can without going off looking wild and crazy, but also, getting those points across and the using the verbiage and changing how you craft that piece of paper to cover all of your intended audiences, and knowing this one needs to be told what's up. This one you need to kind of just nudge along. This one you need to just be, clear cut and they don't care about anything else. And it is creative writing in that way. It seems very constrained in some ways, and it definitely is, but it also is a whole skill and it is very fun for me.
It reminds me a little of writing a paper for a class. I mean, you're given a certain assignment with certain parameters, maybe even a topic that you're supposed to write about. But within that, you can have fun with it. You can enjoy yourself and write about things you're interested in. And sometimes you can write the whole thing out in your own voice and then formalize it a little more. It's just not creativity as if, I don't know, you're free writing, right? Or writing in a journal in the morning. Other questions about this? I was wondering if writing in college prepared you for law school writing, and did the law school writing prepare you for your work? Or did you feel sort of unprepared at each phase?
College writing did nothing for me for law school. Very different. In college, you were like, poli-sci major again. I love words. I have lots of opinions, and reading those essay minimums ain't no thing. I was happy to do that, and then some. Probably there were some folks that got my papers and were like, "Oh yeah, it's her." Whereas law school, and particularly once you're practicing law, you have page maximums, and you only have, even if you have 25 pages, they are not going to read those 25 pages. They're going to read the first 3, and if they don't like what you're saying, or that it makes no sense, or out the door it goes. So I went from and I went to law school, and I even went into law because I love big words, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get to do a job where I get to use all these big words that I have. No one wants my big words. No one in my job. I am offended by this to this day, but so you have to be more concise, you have to edit yourself down, you have to be able to like bring it in and make your point and get the heck out.
Yes, I unfortunately, when I became an attorney, learned that most people just like bullet points in the law. A lot of my clients like bullet points. They want to know, boom, 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 what's going on? Who have I interviewed? What is next? That's it. The court, to your point, the first page, 2-3 pages out of 25 pages is all they will read. Okay. And sometimes you will luck out and you'll have a judge who reads everything. And that's when, it kind of goes back to knowing your audience. You have to be prepared with that information. You do your background research, that this judge will actually read all of your pleadings. Then you can really take your time and express the story in that document. But more often than not, it's the first couple of pages, and you have to make it extremely concise, which for me it sucks, right? Like, I love writing blog posts. I love journaling. I was the La Raza president, and every 2 weeks I had to do a blast for the members, right? On whatever topic I wanted. It could be about my family, or it could be about current events, anything I wanted. And I did not do bullet points because I do not like them. But that is 100% what you do when you're an attorney. You have to figure out how to make it as concise and readable as possible, because everybody is just trying to get on with their days.
Yes.
And when you have those judges that read everything, if you have just been flowery in speech and and not thoughtful and keeping it as concise as possible, then they hold that against you. They come out upset that they had to read all this garbage or all this, fluff that you put into stuff. So for me, in college, I was an English major and I took every creative writing, poetry. I mean, that's what I enjoyed more than reading Chaucer and doing the other stuff. But I think it prepared me for law school in, again, reading something big and turning it into something small. And I definitely had some professors that would, take their pen to what I had written and say, you gotta shorten this up, you gotta shorten this up. And so I had started learning that in college. And then I think, law school teaches you how to think in a different way and how to, again, gather points and make your arguments and do your bullet points and everything else. And so having that, I think, prepared me in my writing that I did in my profession.
I was gonna say that, one of the things I try to teach in my classes is this idea of discourse communities and the ways in which like each community has its own set of values for writing. And so what I'm hearing now is like being concise, right? Not flowery with the language. Would you say there are any more potentially to add and to that list there of what lawyers value or what a judge might value?
I would
Bullet points.
say, yeah, I mean, yes, definitely the bullet points. But to a point that was brought up earlier, trying not to attack opposing counsel in pleadings, particularly in things that you submit to the court.
Sure.
Because there's no room for it. You're all part of the same profession and that is more than just posturing for your client. That goes beyond the bounds of what is fair and what is becoming of the profession. So one example of a pleading that I saw, maybe 3 or 4 years ago was this attorney who filed a motion. And I don't remember what the motion was about, but I do remember that they were attacking opposing counsel and said opposing counsel is like an ostrich who has his head stuck in the sand.
Oh.
And put a picture of an ostrich with their head in the sand in the motion, right? And so in terms of like ground rules, don't do that, right? Be professional, treat the profession, treat your colleagues with respect to their face and in your writing.
Thank you.
I would add structure. You asked about, did law school prepare? College did not prepare me for law school, but law school did prepare me for practice and writing and law. You will learn this format called IRAC. I'm not gonna explain it. You'll get beat into your head and you will use it every day afterwards that you write something. I still use it. And it's a structure that everyone knows and expects. So
Is that IRAC?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll have to look that up.
There's also CREAC.
Korea.
It's conclusion, rule analysis, conclusion. And then IRAC is issue, rule analysis, conclusion. Both acceptable.
yes, but the structure is expected.
Did you say it was called, it wasn't crack?
Yeah, it's IRAC.
IRAC, what's the second one?
It's CREAC. I might have actually left.
Oh, and E, there's an E in there. Okay, sorry.
Abbreviation.
That would be funny if it was. Okay. Yes.
So y'all have pretty much said to me, you define your writing to cater to the audience, whether it's your clients, the court, and as well as the judge as well. For education, do you find your, when applying to law school and your specific professors, did you have to really research how they would want your writing to be completed? Or is that something that like they develop and you kind of just have to step forward?
They told me what to do and I did it. It was not, yeah.
To that end though, office hours. I didn't go to office hours in undergrad and I didn't actually realize the value of office hours until law school. And that's basically like being in chambers with the judge, having a conversation with them, right? They're going to give you basically the answers to their tests in office hours, how they want it conveyed to them and what they're looking for, right? So in that sense, there is this catering to the professor. I've found that at least for most of my classes, I was very fortunate to have professors who were like, I want to hear what you think about this. I don't want to hear what I think about this. But in law school, it was very much like, no, there is this right answer, and this is what I'm looking for. On my tests for remedies, one of my professors was like, I'm going to ask you the craziest questions, one of which will be, what color was the defendant's car who ran the red light? Blue, that's the answer? Okay, cool, that's it, right? But that's not something I would have known to even focus on had I not gone to office.
I guess for me, I did well in high school, and I took my first English class in college, and I got like a C-. And I went back to my dorm room and I cried because, oh my gosh, what am I, what do we have here? And then I read through and I figured out what the professor was looking for, and what he liked to be done different. And so my next paper I did better and improved. And so so you have to figure out what your audience wants. You can start with what you think is right and then learn from there. A quick point on what you had mentioned about what do we do with these things? Another big one for us attorneys is in these pleadings that we put together, we have to cover ourselves, because if we don't make all the arguments that we can make, our client can come after us for malpractice because we failed to mention that this happened or that happened. And so it's this thing of my approach, and when I sit down with a client and have them hire me, back when I was litigating, is I made it very clear my approach. I'm not one to sling mud. Definitely, if there's a safety issue or something, I'm going to put it in your pleading, and I have no problem doing that. But flinging mud for the pain of flinging mud, it was not my approach. And so we have our client that we have to advocate for. And if we have a client that is insisting that we put this or that into the pleading, even though I don't think it's going to sit well with the judge, and I think there's a better approach to doing it, we are the advocate for our client. We have to do what hopefully we can convince our client, don't make me do that, because I don't think it's a good idea. But we're constantly up against that, and erring on the side of throwing everything in the kitchen sink in there, even though we know we want to be concise, is kind of a protective mechanism from getting accused of failing to make an argument.
Sure. Thank you.
Sarah?
Do you believe in writer's block? If so, what helps you to get over it, especially when the writing is not for you?
Absolutely. Definitely believe in writer's block. What helps me is if I stand up and walk away for 10 minutes. Which is really difficult because in the course of a day, you've got all of these things that are due, all of these emails that you need to read and respond to, all of these tasks that 10 minutes to just get up and kind of take your mind off of things. It seems like this big sacrifice that you can't make, but it's important to just remind yourself that you can make that sacrifice, and you should. One, you shouldn't be staring at the screen for so long. And two, you need to stand up and remove yourself from something that isn't serving you, right? And if you've got writer's block and staring at the screen is not going to help you get over it, it's time to readjust your environment, and hopefully that works.
I find physical movement also helps. Even if it's rereading the source documents while I'm, on a stationary bike or something like that. I cannot read and use a treadmill or an elliptical. I fall every time. But I can't sit on a stationary bike, and the movement for me is helpful.
Yes.
I guess it's a question about school, rewarding, how do you guys do that? Do you find your work really rewarding? That maybe it's a hard thing to do, but once it's done, you feel good about it.
I mean, I am jealous of these folks because she knew she wanted to be a lawyer at 4 and he knew in college. I'm still not sure. But yes, I do find it rewarding. I I had two parents who were lucky in that they found what they wanted to do and they did it and they got paid for it and they were like, just find what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I was like, well, what if I love playing video games every day? I don't get paid for that. So for me, that's why I kind of spent some time in law before I went to law school, to get a sense of it. And I enjoy reading and I enjoy writing and I do that a whole heck of a lot. And for me, this is as close as I'm going to get to something where like I get paid to do it. And it's not awful, it's decent, and there are parts of it that I enjoy.
I would say that there's kind of two kinds of lawyers. There's the lawyers that like to argue, and then there's the lawyers that just like to solve problems. And I do like to argue, but the joy that I get in it is solving problems and coming up with good solutions for clients. And I absolutely get satisfaction from doing that.
100%. Solving problems, like being able to, kind of going off of what I had said at some point earlier, but taking something and then figuring out what the solution is, right? Figuring out how to creatively solve that problem, figuring out how to use language and words and different kind of arguments to make something happen, right? It's almost like magic. And that I love. And being able to be in a profession that is so mentally stimulating in that way is something that I enjoy. And it takes the sting out of the not so fun stuff of the profession, right? Getting into petty fights with opposing counsel, not so fun. Being confused for the court interpreter, often not so fun, right? All of these not so fun moments of the profession are made better not only by what I'm doing for my family, right? Like family upward mobility, but also what I'm doing for myself and what makes me feel fulfilled. And that is being able to use my brain, my knowledge, my experiences in finding creative solutions.
Beautiful answers. I'm just stunned. And I'm also relating. I wonder if a lot of jobs are like that. You know, the best kinds of jobs. Sort of intellectually stimulating. You get to do some of the things that you really love. There's parts that aren't great, politics and things. I always thought if I worked at a college, there would never be any politics. It would just be like all these people that love learning and writing, and the students would all be perfectly behaved and read everything I assigned and would change their lives. And it's not exactly that, but sometimes it's not that different from that, you know? Because I love working with students and that makes all the politics better. Sarah.
What is something you wish you could tell your younger self that will also be useful to the students in this room?
Don't be afraid to make a mistake. And when you make the mistake, just own up to it and move forward. I think that is, and especially for young attorneys, probably one of the biggest hurdles that I found, like the attorneys that I mentor, or the law school students that I mentor, it's, oh, I'm so afraid to make a mistake. And I don't want to make a mistake. And there's like this perfectionism part of it, right? First, you're going to make mistakes. That is part of the practice of law, right? Like kind of cliche, but it is a practice of law. You're going to be practicing it for forever, right? But it's, okay, I made a mistake and now I want to cover it up. Now I want to not tell anybody because I'm embarrassed that I made a mistake. And I can say that at least in the area of law that I practice, there are very few mistakes that you can make that can't be remedied in some way, right? And you might not know what that remedy is until you tell somebody, oh, I made a mistake. And then that person also having made that mistake can say, oh, well, you filed this type of motion. Yeah, you're going to have to fall on the sword a little bit, admit to the court that you made a mistake, but that's going to solve the problem and you can move forward. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And when you make them, own up to them and then just plan for how to move forward.
I imagine a lot of ambitious people are perfectionists. I see it in students sometimes. It's hard for them to start. It is hard for them to admit mistakes. Sometimes with my colleagues, they don't want to admit mistakes. But that's how you learn, right?
So I would say, in college, don't jump through the hoops. Don't come here to just satisfy a requirement. Take the opportunity to learn, because when we get older, we don't have that opportunity. And it truly is an opportunity. I look back to when I went to college, I had a great time. But I was jumping through a lot of hoops. I mean, I really didn't, I wasn't immersed in the moment and getting everything I could get out of the education. So here you are, and enjoy it and get everything you can get out of it. And then the other thing that I would say is this 5 a.m. thing that I do, not that you have to get up at 5 a.m., but if you get up before your day begins a little bit earlier and spend a little time, just being with yourself and thinking and maybe writing a little bit or whatever, that practice, it has completely changed my life. And I've written this book because I've set aside that time, and it's made me rethink about things that I want to do. And so find some kind of a practice like that checks in with yourself and sees how you're doing and changes it so that you're doing better.
Yeah, someone's gonna look at that transcript. I wasn't planning on going to law school, but maybe having a little foresight and thinking like someone might want to see that anyway would have been helpful. I did not. I lived in the moment. It was a lovely moment. I enjoyed that moment. But yeah, for me, it was just leave more options open. I may have closed a door or two inadvertently. But a little foresight would have helped with.
Thank you for that. More questions? Yes.
I invite the gentleman, could you do a shameless plug and tell us the title of this book coming out?
It's called Untangling Together, a Guide to a Healthy Divorce. And it's, any day. I'm actually redoing the cover because I'll upload that. So probably within the next week, it'll be out there.
And I think it's on the flyer. Thanks for that, Donna.
I think it is on the flyer.
Oh, okay. Oh, it is. That's it. Anyone else? All right, let's wrap this up with a lightning round. Since you mentioned Jerry Maguire, I want each of you to tell me your favorite movie about law. It can be the first one that comes to mind, but if you have a favorite movie about law or TV show, tell us what it is. The more frivolous, the better.
I can tell you what I hate the most.
You can tell us what you hate.
I hate Suits the most.
Oh, yeah.
Suits.
Yes, I think that for me is basically like, because everyone comes up to you and is like, do you watch Suits? Do you watch Suits? And I'm like, no, I don't, but now I never will.
I did watch it and I hate it even more now that I've watched it.
My parents watch it.
Mine was Erin Brockovich.
Yep.
Mine too.
Erin Brockovich, okay. Erin? Not Erin.
No.
Nothing comes to mind?
No.
Legally Blonde?
I've never seen Legally Blonde.
No.
I
saw it only recently.
I like Law and Order because there's 4 million episodes of it.
All right, we'll say Law and Order. All right, everyone, that's it. Thank you so much for sharing space with us.